Captain Lee Minho pressed his palm against the cool metal of the command chair as the deep space research vessel Taigok dropped out of hyperspace. After 100 years exploring the far edges of the Andromeda Spiral, he and his crew of 47 were finally coming home to Earth. The temporal shielding around their ship had kept them safe from the strange time storms they had encountered in deep space. But now that familiar blue marble should be waiting for them, something felt wrong. The silence in the command center was too heavy to complete. "Navigation report," Minho called out, his voice steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. "Park Ji-won." His navigation officer for the past 30 years stared at her instruments with a confused frown. Her hands moved across the controls, checking and rechecking the readings. "Sir, I'm not picking up any signals from Earth. No communication traffic, no beacon signals, nothing at all." Minho walked over to stand behind her station. The coordinates were correct. They were exactly where Earth should be, where it had always been for billions of years. But the screen showed only empty space, a void where their home planet should have existed. "Run a full system scan," he ordered. "Maybe our equipment got damaged during the journey." Dr. Kim Sora looked up from her workstation across the bridge. As the ship's temporal physicist, she had spent decades studying the time distortions that plague deep space travel. Her face was pale as she studied the readings on her screen. "Captain, I'm checking the Galactic database network," she said, her voice getting smaller with each word. "According to every record I can access, there has never been a planet at these coordinates. No Earth, no Sol system, no record of our solar system ever existing." The bridge fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Minho felt the deck seemed to shift beneath his feet, though he knew the artificial gravity was working perfectly. "That's impossible," whispered Communications Officer Hanjina from her station. "We launched from Earth. We have pictures, records, families back home." Dr. Sora's fingers flew across her console, accessing deeper database layers. "I'm running searches for any mention of humanity in the galactic records. No results. It's like we never existed at all." Over the next 3 days, the horrible truth began to emerge. The crew worked in shifts, some sleeping while others searched desperately through every database they could access. They found trade records, diplomatic treaties, and historical documents spanning thousands of years. But nowhere in any of these records was there any mention of Earth's, humanity, or their home solar system. Dr. Sora made the breakthrough on the 4th day. She had been analyzing quantum signatures in the local space-time fabric when she discovered something that made her hands shake. "Captain, I need you to see this," she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. Minho hurried to her station, followed by the senior officers. On her screen was a complex display of temporal energy patterns, lines, and waves that showed how time and space flowed in this region. "These readings show massive temporal manipulation," Sora explained. "Someone or something used incredibly advanced technology to alter the timeline itself. Didn't just destroy Earth, they erased it from history, made it so Earth never existed in the first place." Navigation Officer Park Ji-won stared at the display. "But how are we still here? If Earth never existed, how could we have been born?" Dr. Sora pointed to another section of her screen. "Our temporal shielding. During our deep space mission, we were protected from normal space-time. Exotic matter in our shields created a pocket of reality that stayed connected to the original timeline. We're the only proof that Earth ever existed." The crew spent hours going through their own ship's records, finding videos of Earth's blue oceans, pictures of families they had left behind, personal logs talking about places that now apparently had never existed. They were living ghosts, survivors of a world that had been wiped from existence. Security Chief Major Yang Dongwu was the first to speak the question they were all thinking. Who could do something like this, and why? Dr. Sora had been working to trace the temporal energy signatures. The quantum pattern suggests multiple sources working together. This wasn't done by one species or civilization. This was organized, planned, carried out by several different groups working as one. Through careful analysis of subspace communication networks, they began to piece together information about the hegemony. It was an ancient alliance of 7 alien races that had controlled large portions of the galaxy for thousands of years. These species valued order, predictability, and control above all else. From what I can determine, Dr. Sora reported during their emergency meeting, humanity was seen as a threat to their established order. We were too adaptable, too unpredictable. Our tendency to explore, to push boundaries, to refuse to accept. Limitations made us dangerous to their vision of a controlled galaxy. Captain Minho looked around at his crew, these 47 souls who were now the only humans left in existence. So they simply erased us from time itself. The weight of their situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. They were alone in a universe that had been rewritten to exclude their entire species. But as Minho looked at the determined faces around him, he began to feel something else growing alongside the grief and shock. They were still alive. And humans had never been good at accepting the impossible. 3 months had passed since the crew of the Taigok discovered their homeworld, had been erased from existence. 3 months of jumping from system to system, following the faintest traces of human technology signatures. Hoping against hope that they were not the only survivors in the galaxy, Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge, staring at the small mining station that hung in orbit around a dead planet. Kepler mining station looked like it had seen better days. Its hull was patched with different metals, and several sections appeared to be completely shut down to save power. "I'm detecting 17 life signs," reported Park Ji-won from her navigation station. "The energy signatures match human technology, but they're trying very hard to stay hidden." Dr. Kim Sora looked up from her console. "Captain, this area has very strange readings. Space around this station is filled with exotic matter particles. They're creating some kind of temporal dead zone." Minho nodded slowly. A temporal dead zone would explain how humans could still be alive here. If the area was cut off from normal time flow, the hegemony's erasure technology might not have reached it. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "This is Captain Lee Minho of the research vessel Taigok. We are humans seeking other survivors. Please respond." The silence stretched for long minutes. Then a gruff voice came through the speakers. "Prove it. Tell me something only a real human would know." Minho smiled sadly. "Earth had blue oceans. And white clouds? We called it the third rock from the sun. And right now, I bet you miss the smell of rain more than anything else in the universe." Another pause. Then the voice came back, softer this time. "Docking Bay 2 is opening for you, Captain. Welcome to what's left of humanity." Engineer Choi Taemin met them at the airlock. He was a thin man, with tired eyes and hands stained black from years of mining work. Behind him stood 16 other humans, men and women who looked like they had been living on the edge of survival for a very long time. "You're the first new faces we've seen in 8 months, Taemin said, shaking Minho's hand.
The last group
Was a family of 5 from the agricultural station on Kepler 4 for to see. The hegemony found them 2 weeks after they contacted us." "The hegemony is still hunting survivors?" asked Dr. Sora. Taemin's expression darkened. "They've been systematically eliminating any humans they missed during the initial erasure. We've lost 3 entire colonies in the past year." The farming settlement on Ross 128, the research outpost near Proxima Centauri, and a group of traders who were hiding in the asteroid belt of the Wolf 359 system. He led them deeper into the station, through corridors that hummed with barely contained energy. This mining operation was studying exotic matter when the erasure happened. "The particles here create a bubble of disconnected time. We exist, but we're cut off from the normal flow of history." Over the following days, Taemin shared everything his people had learned about surviving in a galaxy that no longer recognized their existence. They had developed ways to hide their energy signatures, methods for avoiding hegemony patrol routes, and most importantly, they had maintained contact with other survivor groups. "There are more of us out there than you might think," explained Communications Officer Yu Moran, a young woman who had been working the quantum radio equipment. "We've made contact with several groups using very carefully encrypted signals." She showed them to the communications room, where a complex array of equipment lined the walls. The Generation ship Hangung survived because it was traveling between galaxies when the erasure happened. They have nearly 2,000 people on board. There's also a group of asteroid miners in the Vega system, some researchers on a deep space laboratory, and a few families hiding on abandoned trading stations. Dr. Sora spent every waking hour studying the exotic matter that protected the mining station. Working with the station's scientists, she began to understand how the hegemony's temporal technology worked. They're using massive devices called temporal anchors, she explained, during a meeting of all the senior staff. These anchors are positioned throughout the galaxy, constantly broadcasting the altered timeline. They're what keeps Earth erased from history. Captain Minho leaned forward. In his chair? What would happen if we could destroy these anchors? If we could destabilize enough of them at the same time, we might be able to restore the original timeline, Sora said carefully. But it would require perfect timing across dozens of star systems. The anchors are synchronized. If we attack them one by one, the hegemony will realize what we're doing and strengthen their defenses. The challenge was enormous. The scattered human survivors would need to coordinate a simultaneous strike across multiple star systems, using equipment they barely understood, against an enemy that controlled most of the galaxy. Communications specialist Han Gina stepped forward. I think I can help with the coordination problem. I've been working on quantum entanglement communicators that operate outside normal space-time. If we can build enough of these devices, we could create an instant communication network that the hegemony can't detect or jam. Over the next weeks, the survivors began building their secret network. Using quantum mechanics and exotic matter technology, they created communication devices that could instantly connect human settlements across vast distances. Each group of survivors received one of these special communicators, linking them together. In a hidden web of resistance, the plan was dangerous and desperate, but it was the only hope they had. Humanity would either restore their place in history or die trying to reclaim what had been stolen from them. The war began in shadows and silence. Captain Lee Min-ho gathered his most trusted officers in the cramped meeting room aboard the Taigok, now hidden in the asteroid field of a dead system. Maps of hegemony territories covered the walls, marked with red dots showing the locations of temporal anchors. We can't fight them head-on, Min-ho explained to the assembled group. They have thousands of ships and control most of the galaxy. But they don't know we exist, and that's our greatest weapon. Major Yang Dong-woo, the ship's tactical officer, studied the intelligence reports they had gathered. The key is to make our attacks look like accidents or sabotage by other species. The hegemony has plenty of enemies. We just need to blend in with the chaos. Their first target was the industrial planet Vex Prime, world covered in factories that produced components for hegemony technology. The temporal anchor there was hidden inside a massive power plant that supplied energy to half the planet. Pilot Bae-yuna volunteered for the mission. She was small and quick, with a talent for getting into places she didn't belong. I can pose as a maintenance worker, she said. The factories use workers from dozens of different species. One more alien face won't attract attention. 3 weeks later, Yuna walked through the gates of the Vex Prime Central Power Station wearing the blue coveralls of a third-shift maintenance tech. Her forged identification said she was a Rillan, a species known for their skill with electrical systems. The real Rillan worker she was replacing was enjoying an unexpected vacation on a distant planet. Paid for with funds the humans had carefully stolen from hegemony accounts. The power plant was enormous, filled with humming generators and crackling energy conduits. Yuna spent 2 days learning the layout, memorizing guard patterns, and identifying the critical systems. The temporal anchor was housed in the deepest level, protected by multiple security barriers. On the third night, she made her move, using a small device Dr. Sora had built. She introduced a cascade failure into the power grid. Did anyone investigating, it would look like a simple equipment malfunction caused by poor maintenance. The explosion that followed destroyed 3 city blocks and left the temporal anchor offline for 6 hours before backup systems could restore it. Meanwhile, on the trade hub of Nexus Station, Scout Lee Hanbin was playing a different game. Had spent months establishing himself as a freelance computer technician, someone who could fix the complex systems that kept the massive space station running. Nexus Station was the perfect cover for their operations. Thousands of ships docked there every day, carrying traders, diplomats, and travelers from across the galaxy. The temporal anchor was built into the station's central computer core. Disguised as part of the navigation and communication systems, Hanbin had gained access to the maintenance schedules by dating a hegemony technician named Zella, she thought. He was just another charming alien trying to make a living on the frontier. She had no idea that every time she left him alone in her apartment, he was copying security codes and system blueprints. The virus he introduced was a masterpiece of subtle programming. It would remain dormant for weeks, then slowly corrupt the quantum processors that controlled the temporal anchor. When the system finally failed, it would look like a manufacturing defect in the processors, something that happened occasionally with advanced technology. The beautiful thing about this approach, and been reported during their encrypted communications session, is that they'll blame the component manufacturers. It will take them months to figure out what really happened. As the weeks passed, similar operations took place across the galaxy. Human agents, disguised as refugees, traders, and workers, infiltrated hegemony facilities. Some posed as members of species that had been conquered by the hegemony, playing on existing resentments. Others created entirely new identities, using forged documents and careful acting to blend into alien societies. Each sabotage was carefully planned to avoid suspicion. Equipment failures, industrial accidents, computer viruses, and system overloads became their weapons. The humans learned to think like the species they were impersonating, to understand what kinds of problems each alien race might cause. During these infiltration missions, they discovered something that filled them with both hope and horror. Humanity was not the first civilization the hegemony had erased from history. Dr. Sora found fragments of data suggesting that dozens of other species had been corrected. Over the centuries, there are ghost signals in some of the older temporal anchors, she explained during one of their planning sessions. Traces of civilizations that used to exist but were wiped from the timeline. The hegemony has been doing this for thousands of years. This knowledge changed their mission. They weren't just fighting to restore Earth and humanity. We're fighting for every species that had been murdered by temporal erasure, every civilization. That had been deemed too inconvenient to be allowed to exist. The hegemony began to notice the pattern of failures, but they attributed them to increased rebel activity by conquered species. They never suspected that the attacks were coordinated by a race they believed they had completely eliminated. Dr. Sora's research revealed the critical weakness they needed. The temporal anchors synchronized their operations every few months, sharing data and updating their timeline controls. During these synchronization cycles, the anchors were vulnerable for exactly 17 minutes. "We'll have one chance," she told the assembled survivors during their final planning meeting. "All anchors must be attacked simultaneously during the next synchronization window. If we miss even one, the entire plan fails." The invisible war was about to become very visible indeed. 1 year had passed since the Tygok discovered Earth had been erased from existence. Now, on the anniversary of that terrible day, humanity would either reclaim their place in history or die trying. Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the countdown timer reach its final seconds. Across the galaxy, 17 teams of human survivors were positioned near temporal anchors, waiting for his signal. Everything depended on perfect timing. "All teams report ready," announced Communications Officer Hanjina, her voice steady, despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Dr. Kim, Sora was already at the captured hegemony research facility. On Chronos 7, the most heavily defended temporal anchor in the galaxy, she had spent 3 months infiltrating the facility, posing as a research assistant. Now she crouched in the facility's central control room, her hands poised over the restoration matrix controls. "Timeline synchronization begins in 30 seconds, she reported through the quantum communicator. "Remember, we have exactly 17 minutes while the anchors are vulnerable." Major Yang Dongwu led the assault team on Vex Prime, the same industrial world where pilot Bai Yuna had struck months earlier. This time they weren't being subtle. Yang and his team of 12 humans moved through the power plant like ghosts. Using stolen hegemony weapons and armor? Temporal anchor located, Yang whispered into his communicator as his team reached the deepest level of the facility, beginning placement of charges. Similar reports came in from teams across the galaxy. Scout Lee Hanben was inside Nexus Station's computer core. Engineer Choi Taemin had infiltrated the mining platform orbiting Kepler for 38b. Each team faced impossible odds, but they had trained for this moment for months. Synchronization window is open, Dr. Sora announced. Execute, execute, execute. The attacks began simultaneously across 6 star systems. Explosions rocked temporal anchor facilities as human saboteurs detonated carefully placed charges. Computer viruses crashed quantum processors. Energy weapons melted critical components. For 17 precious minutes, the humans struck at the heart of the hegemony's power. Then, reality began to break apart. Captain. Minho watched in amazement as space itself seemed to crack like broken glass around his ship. Through the fractures, he could see glimpses of other worlds. Other times, a blue planet with white clouds flickered into existence for a moment before vanishing again. Temporal cascade is beginning. Dr. Sora's voice crackled through the communicator. The timeline is trying to restore itself, but the process is unstable. I'm seeing fragments of erased civilizations starting to reappear. Throughout the galaxy, impossible things began to happen. On worlds that had been empty for centuries, ancient cities suddenly materialized, populated by the ghosts of species that had been erased from time. Ships that had never been built appeared in space. Crewed by beings who remembered dying and being forgotten, the hegemony realized what was happening. Every available warship was mobilized in a desperate attempt to stop the humans before the restoration could be completed. Massive fleets converged on the remaining human positions above the gas giant Titan's fury. Captain Minho found himself commanding the most important battle in human history. The Taigok led a ragtag fleet of converted mining ships, cargo haulers, and research vessels against the hegemony's most powerful dreadnoughts. Enemy fleet approaching from 3 directions, reported Navigation Officer Park Ji-won. Count 47 heavy cruisers and 12 dreadnoughts. Minho smiled grimly. Well, we've faced worse odds before. It wasn't true, but his crew needed to hear confidence in his voice. The space battle was unlike anything ever seen before. As the timeline continued to fracture, the laws of physics became unreliable. Weapons fire curved through space in impossible directions. Ships phased in and out of existence as different versions of reality tried to assert themselves. The mining ship New Seoul, commanded by Captain Park Subin, rammed a hegemony cruiser that was 3 times its size. The collision created a temporal explosion that aged the enemy ship 1,000 years and seconds, crumbling it to dust.
Our team's this?
Sora, came the physicist's urgent voice over the communicator. Temporal cascade is at 70%. The restoration matrix is destabilizing. Whatever you're going to do it now. Major Yang's team was fighting their way out of the Vex Prime facility as hegemony security forces surrounded them. We're pinned down in Section 7, he reported. The anchor is destroyed, but we may not make it to extraction. Negative. Major Minho replied, watching enemy dreadnoughts closing in on his position. Complete the mission. That's an order. Space around Titan's fury began to tear open like fabric. Through the dimensional rift, Minho could see Earth appearing and disappearing. Sometimes showing the blue world they remembered, sometimes showing a burned wasteland, sometimes showing nothing at all. The hegemony's flagship, a massive vessel, called the Eternal Order, emerged from hyperspace directly in front of the Taigok. Its weapons charged with enough energy to vaporize a moon. Sir, whispered Park Gu-won, they have us targeted. Minho gripped his command chair as reality continued to collapse around them. The sky split open in a blaze of temporal fire as different versions of the universe tried to occupy the same space. Through the chaos, he could hear Dr. Sora's voice announcing that the cascade had reached critical mass. Time itself was about to choose which history would survive. The universe screamed as reality tore itself apart. Captain Lee Minho watched from the bridge of the Taigaku's Earth. materialized in the void like a blue jewel catching starlight. For a moment, his heart soared with triumph. Then he saw what the restoration was truly costing. Two different versions of reality were trying to exist in the same space. The Earth that appeared was not the world they remembered. It flickered between different states, sometimes the blue planet of their memories, sometimes a burned wasteland, sometimes a world covered in strange cities they had never seen. Each change sent ripples of temporal energy across the galaxy. "Captain, I'm reading massive casualties across multiple systems," reported Dr. Kim Sora from her position at the Hegemony Research Facility. Her voice was breaking with exhaustion and horror. "The timeline merge is killing millions of people. Some are dying because they exist in both timelines. Others are dying because they don't exist in either. On the restored Earth, cities appeared and vanished like mirages. New York materialized for 30 seconds, filled with people who remembered living their entire lives, then disappeared, taking 8 million souls with it. Tokyo flickered into existence, showing buildings that had never been built, populated by families who had different memories of their own history. The oceans themselves were confused. The Atlantic Ocean shifted position by 300 miles, creating massive tsunamis that swept across coastlines that weren't supposed to be there. The quantum foam of space-time bled raw energy that scorched entire star systems, turning planets into glass and stars into cosmic storms. Captain Minho's ship was caught in the chaos above Titan's fury when the final Hegemony dreadnought exploded. The temporal shockwave threw the Taigok through 3 different dimensions before depositing it in orbit around Kronos 7, where Dr. Sora was still fighting to stabilize the restoration matrix. "I'm going down to help her," Minho told his crew. "Navigation Officer Park, you have command. Get our people to safety." The Hegemony Research Facility was collapsing around itself as Minho fought his way through twisted corridors. Sections of the building existed in different time periods. He passed through a hallway that showed the facility being built, and stepped into a room where it was already ancient ruins. In the central control chamber, he found Dr. Sora working frantically at the temporal controls, while High Arbiter Kethfer, the leader of the Hegemony, lay wounded beneath fallen debris. The alien's crystalline form flickered between dimensions, sometimes solid, sometimes transparent like a ghost. Captain Sora called out without looking up from her work. "The timelines are fighting each other. I can stabilize them, but I have to choose which version of reality survives. Billions of people will die either way." Kethfer's voice echoed strangely, as if coming from multiple realities at once. "Your species was erased because you refused to accept limits. You would rather burn the galaxy than accept your place in the order we built." Minho knelt beside the wounded alien, checking its injuries. Despite everything the Hegemony had done, he couldn't leave a wounded being to die. "Then you never understood us at all. We don't burn things down for spite. We do it because some things are worth the cost of rebuilding." The facility shook as another temporal wave passed through it. Through the shattered windows, Minho could see the galaxy reshaping itself. Stars were being born and dying in seconds. Planets moved to new positions. The very laws of physics seemed to be arguing with themselves about what was real. "There's a third option," Dr. Sora said suddenly. "Instead of choosing one timeline, I can merge them. It will be chaotic, and many people will still die, but both realities will contribute to the final result." "Do it," Minho ordered. The merge began with a sound like reality itself singing. Every atom in the galaxy vibrated as 2 different versions of history crashed together and became one. Earth stabilized as a world that bore the scars of the century it had never lived. Its surface showed strange patchworks where different timelines had fused together. Cities existed that remembered being destroyed and rebuilt. Oceans contained water from 2 different realities. Mountains had been moved and changed, showing the geological history of worlds that had never quite existed in either timeline. The most profound change was in the people themselves. Billions of humans found themselves alive again, but with memories of dying and being reborn. They remembered the century of non-existence as a strange dream of darkness and silence. Children were born who had grandparents from both timelines, carrying genetic material that had been erased and restored. Captain Minho helped High Arbiter Kethfer to an escape pod as the research facility finally collapsed completely. Alien looked at him with eyes that reflected light from multiple dimensions. "What you have done will echo through time itself," Kethfer said. "The galaxy will never be the same." Good Minho replied. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to erase entire civilizations." The final merge sent one last pulse of temporal energy across the galaxy. When it faded, the universe had settled into its new configuration. Earth orbited a sun that remembered being alone for a century. The galaxy contained dead systems that had been scorched by temporal fire. Impossible anomalies where the laws of physics still couldn't agree on what was real. In regions where time itself moved differently, humanity had written their message into the fabric of space-time itself in letters of blood and broken worlds. Those who try to erase others from existence will find themselves rewritten in return. The cost had been enormous, measured in the deaths of billions in the reshaping of reality itself, but they had returned to reclaim their place in history, and no force in the universe would ever be able to erase them again.